This morning, I was having a think about this pattern I noticed with myself that some weeks I feel flow. Some weeks I feel like I can focus on what I need to focus on, trying my best to maybe do a little bit better than the day before. Mainly when I'm talking about the things I need to focus on, it's something along the lines of work, gym, good sleep, good food, maybe connecting with some friends, maybe having some downtime, maybe having some reflection. And so weeks that I would consider are the weeks of flow would be ones where there's like a foundation of those work, sleep, food, connection, rest, reflection that's kind of not autonomous, maybe almost autonomous, with a touch of trying to progress forward. And there is a kind of mindfulness that this is important. Also, there is a sense that thoughts that try to come in or intruders that try to interfere with these fundamentals are kind of somewhat easily navigated. Like you kind of know that I shouldn't really think about this thing that person told me the other day. It's not really pressing right now. Maybe I can think about it later. Maybe I don't even really need to think about it. Weeks when there are flow, you feel you can look at such a thought and disregard it with ease. What's in between my hands is so much more important than this thing that might have been an insult or might have been an indirect way this person was judging me, or a concern about some event, some time in the future, maybe a month in the future. You kind of look at that concern and you say, hey, I don't really want to think about this right now. And you continue doing, in my case, it would be reading and developing scripts or doing a correct movement in this exercise in the gym. Today I had back, for example. So trying to connect with the muscle mind connection, focus on, I'm feeling it in my back muscles, rather than, while I'm kind of automatically doing this move, I'm thinking about this thing that's going to happen in a month. No, I push it aside. Whereas I would compare such weeks and the kind of positive drive, momentum, flow that such weeks give with the weeks where you're not flowing, where the weeks that you're low, where you're trying maybe to focus on the things you need to focus on, but you're also being encumbered or tripped up by thoughts and intruders into that kind of attempt to build assertive momentum, and where it's not so accessible for you to be able to tell this thought to go away, or of the past or of the future. And I just found myself trying to think about what are the qualities of those weeks. Who is the person that is having the flow weeks? Who is the person that is having the low weeks? I noticed that there are some things that we can control that might help, in my personal experience, increase the times where we're at flow a little bit and decrease the times where we're feeling low to a certain extent. And maybe at the same time, there are things that we can't control. And also that's the point. That's if something knocks us off our feet in our journey in life, then it was really designed to do that. You're not supposed to be flowing in a moment like that. You're supposed to be falling. You're supposed to be picking yourself back up. You're supposed to be learning from every aspect of that. Why did I fall? How did I pick myself back up? How can I use this knowledge in the future to help myself avoid such situations or manage them, and then confront situations that are maybe even more difficult than the one I fell in, maybe even without falling in that new instance. So I just wanted to kind of differentiate so that I don't necessarily give this idea that, if maybe someone does all the things that are a precursor to weeks of feeling flow, a time period of feeling flow, then I should feel flow. And if I don't, there's something wrong, either with me or with this advice. And hey, maybe there is going to be some missing stuff, of course, but I just felt like it's more realistic to come into contact with this idea of an external world that we live in that has lots of unpredictable elements in it that are part of life, obviously, and also part of our growing. When I looked at this kind of question, let's say, the first idea that I'm familiar with, that you might be familiar with as well, is this idea of a health triad or health trinity. I had to look this word up. And this idea is built on 3 pillars. There's sleep, food, and exercise. And there is some research, papers, articles, etc. There's a voice in culture and science saying that, hey, like if you do well in these three and you're consistently like treating yourself well in sleep, food, and exercise, most probably that's going to have some kind of effect on your overall like sense of well-being and mood. And if you haven't like done so in one or more of these, first of all, some of these papers say like the others suffer if your sleep suffers, your exercise and your food suffers, or vice versa. But anyway, if you haven't like taken care of these things in a while and you start improving them, these papers also suggest that, hey, like you're gonna probably feel like somewhat better, if not significantly. And I like thought of this traditional idea and I reflected a bit about like times where I have weeks that are low, times that I have weeks where I flow. And I felt I needed to add something to these three, and it's emotional regulation. It's just my sense of if I'm managing sleep, food, and exercise and I'm not regulating myself emotionally for a certain period of time, like my personality suffers, my confidence suffers. Because why? Because the emotions that I haven't managed to regulate kind of interfere or intrude on whatever I'm trying to do in that given day. So if I'm trying to face or encounter a challenge at work, a particularly challenging script, and I'm really trying to connect the dots between character and structure and so forth, and there's this thing nagging at my mind or at my body, like this feeling of fear or sadness or anxiety, which is kind of like fear, or anger, or even happiness, over happiness, which I'm ignoring, and it's strong enough that it's been there for a few days, then I noticed a likelihood that my attempt to be with what I'm trying to be with, in the case of this example, the script, I probably would not only be distracted, but my kind of natural attempt to meet this script with an empty mind, which is really important, especially in my work, but I think in all things, in work and in gym and social interactions, etc. Like my need to meet this thing in the world with empty mind is completely lost because I'm so influenced by this thing that hasn't been regulated. And it became more of an interesting idea that it might be like, I really can't know. I'm not like a scientist or a psychologist or anything like that, but I just became interested in this idea is maybe it could be significant. Who knows? Maybe even as much as the other three: sleep, food, exercise. I really can't know, but was even beneficial to start thinking in these terms to kind of give it a spotlight in my day. And it especially kind of started to resonate when I thought of like examples, times where I would be emotionally regulating, times where I wouldn't be emotionally regulating. And at least in my reflection, I felt like it was a huge, or at least a significant contributor to feeling good, to taking the words of people less seriously, to loving myself more in a given moment, to receiving others and their states with more empathy rather than with some kind of defensiveness or repulsion or whatever. I would just give a couple of examples because I haven't really defined emotional regulation. I'd prefer to just give examples of what I see as emotional regulation in the context of like when I might be a week off, like a week that I'm off or low, versus a week where I might be like more flowing. There's an example of like, for example, let's say I'm at a birthday and I see a couple that are like friends of my friends and I don't know them, or an example of like an argument with someone I care about. Right, let's look at these two examples. A week where I'm off or low, I might look at this couple that is at a birthday, friends of friends that I don't know, and I might feel fear of like introducing myself as like social anxiety. Like I don't feel like it's a bit of effort. It's a bit of unknown territory. Will we have a good conversation? And I might just, give in or succumb to those thoughts and fear and just like, okay, I'm going to stay in my comfort zone. I'm going to sit with my friends and I'm just going to stick here. And in the case of the argument, let's say, for example, I'm frustrated in an argument with someone I care about because I want to be right and I want to be heard and I don't feel I'm right and I don't feel I'm being heard. I might act a bit passively aggressively towards that person, or I might act like fine. Like, I don't know how to resolve this like constructively. So I might just agree with that person or agree to disagree or something along those lines and end it relatively quickly. And if I kind of extrapolate from those weeks where I'm low and I act based on letting that emotion kind of guide my actions, I notice that I get worse and worse. I get more emotionally dysregulated, let's say, and I feel less strong in the face of the fear, for example, of speaking to such a couple, or less ready to take on that argument. Whereas for the weeks where I'm on or flowing, I would go up to that couple and pull up a chair and sit down next to them and just introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Ahmad. I'd love to get to know you guys since you're friends with my friends, and just see where that takes me and not necessarily care. Similarly for the argument, I might say like, hey, like I'm not feeling like I'm being heard. And internally, I might try to quiet my own angers, which say, oh, I should be right, and tell them or communicate to my anger in some indirect way. Like, I don't know if being right is important here as much as being heard and listening is important. And I might regulate in the weeks where I'm flowing those emotions to the point where fear is like, okay, there was no need for this guy to make this guy afraid. There's no danger here. We should actually seek out more of these things. And similarly for anger, there's no need to be upset about not being right, because there was more benefit in listening and engaging and finding ways to be heard. And so I would just kind of leave this ramble with this idea that emotional regulation could be significant. Try to find ways, and this is me a bit speaking to myself as well, try to find ways where you have opportunities to regulate your emotions. Basically, emotions that come up and knock on your door and say, hey, like, listen to me, listen to them, see what they're saying, and start somewhere. Where weeks where you're low, it's going to be harder to do some things. And weeks where you're flowing, it's going to be easier. Just start somewhere and notice the difference when you confront something and regulate it. And notice the difference when you don't. And try to move to a place of better well-being. That's what I'm going to try to do, at least. I hope this is of some benefit. And yeah, see you next episode.